Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Oh, good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Hey.
Welcome, man.
That's me. Happy Friday to you, viewers. Good morning to you also. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has testified before a closed-door congressional committee for hours as it continues investigating her supposed links to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, her husband, former President Bill Clinton, will appear for his own hearing later today. But before that, let's take a listen to what she had to say.
They asked literally the same questions over and over again, which didn't seem to me to be very productive. And then, as I said, toward the end, there were other questions that were totally off subject. I started being asked about UFOs and a series of questions about Pizzagate, one of the most vile, bogus conspiracy theories that was propagated on the internet, that was serving as the basis of a member's questions to me. They had a chance to do it in public, and I wish they had done it in public. And I think they're making the wrong decision, avoiding doing it in public. I think it is fair to say that the vast majority of people who had contact with him before his criminal pleas in 2008 were like most people. They did not know what he was doing. And I think that that is exactly what my husband will testify to. I don't know when the video will be out. I don't know when the transcript will be out. We've asked that they be out as quickly as possible.
Well, Clinton heavily criticized the House of Representatives Oversight Committee and its Republican majority in saying that the proceedings were not designed to seek truth and justice for the victims and survivors of Epstein's crimes. Now, Clinton also says that she was asked about UFOs, unidentified flying objects, aliens essentially, and Pizzagate. Now, if you remember, Pizzagate was a false conspiracy theory which claimed a Washington, D.C. pizzeria was a front for a child sex ring run by her. Clearly not true. Now, the deposition of Clinton was interrupted when Lauren Boebert, she's a Republican member of the committee, she leaked a photo from the room, and that photo was posted on social media. It is against the rules for witnesses or lawmakers to take pictures during closed-door congressional hearings. Now, Bill Clinton, as we said, he will be deposed by the committee later Friday, amid questions over his former relationship with Epstein. Now, Bill Clinton, like a group of other high-powered men, including current U.S. President Donald Trump, did have a well-documented social relationship with Jeffrey Epstein in the late 1990s and early 2000s. So it'll be very interesting to hear what comes out of his own deposition. But let's move on to the Middle East, because talks between the United States and Iran have concluded in Geneva without a breakthrough agreement. This is despite days of negotiations aimed at easing tensions over Tehran's nuclear program. Now, officials have been saying that discussions weren't constructive, but they did stop short of delivering a concrete deal on sanctions relief or uranium enrichment limits. Now, Washington is pushing for a stricter nuclear safeguard, while Tehran is demanding guarantees and economic concessions. Meanwhile, the USS Gerald R. Ford, which is the world's largest aircraft carrier, left an American naval base in southern Greece yesterday on Thursday. That's it on the screen there. And that's after a brief stopover of a few days while it makes its way to the Middle East. Now, the United States has amassed a large number of warships and aircraft in the region as tensions with Iran continue spiking. And our last story on today's World Brief is the news coming out of the African continent. Now, 2 women have been arrested and detained in Uganda after allegedly kissing in public. It's an act of same-sex activity which can lead to a life sentence in that East African country. Now, Their names are Wendy Faith, she's a 22-year-old musician known as Torero Bay, and Alessi Diana Denise, who is 21 years old. They were both taken into custody after police raided their rented room in Uganda's northwest Ora city. This happened last week. Now, the pair have been in custody ever since their arrest, and it's not clear if or when they will be formally charged. Now, Uganda's autocratic president, Yoweri Museveni, signed the Anti-Homosexuality Act into law back in May of 2023, and this was amid international and regional outrage. One of the world's harshest anti-LGBTQ laws is what we see in Uganda. Dr. Rubin mentioned it yesterday when we were talking about Senegal, and it does include life imprisonment for same-sex relationships and the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality. Now, the detentions of these two young women have sparked fresh condemnation from international human rights organizations who warn that this crackdown is deepening fear within Uganda's LGBTQ community and also drawing renewed global criticism to their country. We'll get into discussions about that later. Let's move on to our newspaper headlines from across the world and indeed Nigeria. As ever, we begin with the front page of This Day, and much like many other Nigerian papers, This Day does report that opposition leaders, including Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi, Rabiu Kwankwaso, Rotimi Amechi, and Rauf Aregbesola have rejected the 2026 Electoral Act. They are describing it as anti-democratic, and they also warn that some provisions could undermine electronic transmission of results and threaten transparency ahead of the 2027 general elections. This Day, as we've also been discussing, also features this photograph of First Lady Oluremi Tinubu during a homecoming visit to Delta State, where she was hosted by the Olu of Warri, highlighting really the cultural heritage and royal honours, according to her, in Warri Kingdom. Now, the Olu of Warri did honour the First Lady with the chieftaincy title of Otukpa Orishe of Warri Kingdom, which does translate into the light of God, and it is an honour symbolising heritage, service and royal recognition. So huge congratulations to the First Lady. Let's move on to the Vanguard this morning. The Vanguard does go back to that lead story about the elections, and essentially the opposition has continued to warn that the amended Electoral Act could trigger a democratic crisis ahead of the 2027 election, and they've also vowed to defend every single vote. Now, the New Telegraph, if we take a look at the New Telegraph this morning, it's also weighing in on politics. And the New Telegraph does report that the Independent National Electoral Commission has revised the timetable for the 2027 general elections, and they have now fixed the presidential and National Assembly polls for January 16th, 2027. And for governorship elections and state assembly elections, those are going to be held on the 6th of February, 2027. Mark those in your calendars. Now, the New Telegraph also reports that following complaints from Nigerian travellers about high fares, the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, that's the FCCPC, will extend its investigation into foreign airlines after uncovering price manipulation by local carriers during the December 2025 festive season. Now, the interim report shows peak fares were significantly higher than post-peak levels, with differences on some routes reaching 405,000 naira. That is the difference. It's huge. And the FCCPC emphasized that further analysis is ongoing before any enforcement actions. Well, let's take a look at the Daily Independent rather. The Daily Independent this morning does report that the federal government's extension of this ban on raw sheer nut exports until February 2027 has led to declining incomes for rural communities, people in rural areas. Women, of course, involved in the shea value chain are also affected. Stakeholders have been warning that poor infrastructure, weak industry structure, and limited local processing capacity have prevented the policy from delivering its intended economic benefits. So still a lot to work on there. Let's move on to the Daily Trust this morning, because the Daily Trust is reporting that the Supreme Council for Sharia here in Nigeria has declared that no authority can stop Muslims from practicing Sharia. Now, it is rejecting a United States Congress report that called for the repeal of Sharia law and other blasphemy laws, and essentially insisting that Sharia practice is constitutionally guaranteed and not responsible for Nigeria's security crisis. Let's take a look at The Punch this morning, because The Punch is reporting that bandits killed at least 29 people and abducted several others in northern Nigeria, across northern Nigeria, essentially in the past 72 hours alone. Now, attacks occurred in Adamawa, in Kebbi, Sokoto, and also in Kwara states. Let's move on to The Guardian this morning, because The Guardian is reporting that the federal government, backed by Lagos as well as Kogi, is pushing for state police to improve local security. This is a debate that we've been hearing over and over again, and it's serially making its way on the front page of the Nigerian Guardian. But if we take a look at the UK Guardian this morning, we are seeing that British hospitals and care homes are facing an impending care crash. That is, as research shows, the number of nurses and care workers arriving from overseas has collapsed, again showing why immigration is a good thing. Well, let's move on to the Financial Times this morning, because the president and chief executive of the World Economic Forum has resigned after an investigation by the organization into his links with Jeffrey Epstein have been uncovered. And lastly, we have the Daily Mail. Now, this is a picture of Ian Huntley. He is also referred to as the Soham murderer. If you remember, he was the man who murdered two 10-year-old girls. It was they were called Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman in 2002, and he allegedly, according to his reports, is himself clinging to life after he was attacked in a prison workshop this week. Yeah. That is it. I don't think many people would be too disturbed by that news. If you do remember the Soham murderers back in 2002, there was two young girls who went gone missing. They were pictured in their football jerseys, and it turned out that this man, who was a caretaker at their school, had abducted and murdered them. So those are your newspaper headlines and your brief. Love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, around that time, you had a lot of murders in the UK. Yeah. I mean, another one that comes to mind was the murder of Damilola Taylor, if you remember that period. But real quickly, so we can see the hypocrisy of the Republicans. They finally had Hillary Clinton to come make her deposition. And, they had no questions to ask. They were just fooling and faffing around. The real people that they ought to get on that panel to make their deposition is Howard Lutnick and Donald Trump. The same Donald Trump that documents have now released that there was a deposition document in the DOJ that shows that actually he forced himself on an underage. There was an account, one of the so many accounts that the DOJ is now trying to delete now.
Yes, they somehow got missing.
So this one now, after this, I know Clinton too will come make his deposition. Hope they know that after Clinton makes his deposition too, Trump too should be able to come and make his deposition. And you see, why is Trump so quick to say, oh, this report didn't indict me, I'm off the hook? You are not off the hook, brother. Because there was another video making the rounds recently of him saying that underage girls that are going through a lot, when he was talking about Lindsay Lohan or Howard Stern show, are the best in bed. He said you don't stay long with them, but they are underage. Once they are disturbed, they are the best in bed. And afterwards, any other thing can't follow. So we will see if the hypocrisy, and it's part of the hypocrisy that made them send a picture to a right-wing influencer to release a picture of a deposition that's supposed to be secret. We'll see if it will make them call Howard Lutnick. But the joke is on them. As regards Iran, yes, we all know. You see, when people were being optimistic yesterday, there was a deal that was going to be done and all of that, I kept on referring to that, Morning Joe interview with Aragachi, where he had with Joe Scarborough, and Mika Brzezinski, that there is nothing on the table yet, and the fundamentals are not there. Because you see, I do not want a world where we bomb ourselves with nuclear weapons, but let's stop being hypocritical. And that's what Trump and America is doing. You are just going at Iran now because they are convenient for you to go to, because you feel that in that region, you've been able to decimate their allies. How about Trump go after North Korea? Why has he forgotten Rocket Man so soon? Why is he focusing on Iran? And by the way, why is Trump even negotiating that they should remove nuclear deterrent? I thought you said your B-2 bombers destroyed all their nuclear facilities. So why do you care so much today?
That's what he said.
All right, okay. Let me just very quickly on America, and then I'll come back home to Nigeria, newspaper headlines. On Hillary Clinton, that's a big story this morning, out of some of the stories you've shared. And I believe that one of the key takeaways until, of course, the official video and the position is made public is the fact that she opened up with the accusation that it is a political witch hunt, in essence. And the fact that if they wanted to show true investigation and the fact that it was fair, then they should call in the president for questioning himself. They should subpoena him because he has his name mentioned a number of times in the Epstein files. Indeed. But she was also under oath saying that she'd never met Epstein. She'd never interacted with him. She'd never been to his island. Of course, if this is found to be false in the future, it is a federal offense, a criminal offense, because she's lied on the oath. So let's see to what extent it must. I mean, there has to be some elements of truth there. Her husband, however, cannot make those claims when he comes this morning, later on in American time, to talk or to give his own deposition, because there are picture evidences of his relationship with her. She did mention that Ghislaine Maxwell, because that's also come up. She came to their daughter's wedding and said that they knew themselves as casual acquaintances, and she came as a plus one to somebody else. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. And of course, the focus is the midterm elections and how this would affect, particularly for the Democrat candidates. Now, coming home to Nigeria, the story around FCCPC and airline operators of Nigeria, or saying that they were investigating arbitrary price fixing.
Yes.
I bring that to question because we talked about this a number of times around the Yuletide season, and when prices went up really high, especially to some Southeast states. They're saying that they've investigated, and based on similar peak periods in January 2026 and the same factors in foreign exchange, government policies, taxes, the prices came down significantly. Therefore, it meant that they were just fixing prices for the sake of it in order to high profits. But the president of AON has come out to say that actually FCCPC does not have the economic expertise to make such conclusions, especially because there are technicalities and different metrics that determine how prices are determined for airline fares, and that this does not do well for the industry. I want to link this story very quickly to the story on 11,000 naira for cement, and how there's an I can't remember what newspaper it was now, but I think it was the Daily Trust or so, and that the fact that dealers and middlemen are actually mainly responsible for this hike in prices, and that is an arbitrary, hiking of prices. Just to say that when it comes to prices for consumers, yes, the FCCPC has the right to protect consumers and investigate those within the system who are deliberate in making life difficult for Nigerians by hiking the prices arbitrarily. But for the airline, it might be different because they're saying now that no, it's a different set of rules for us and so on. But we'll keep our eyes on that story.
Thank you, Ayo.
Okay. On former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, these are the major takeaways. One, she said, I never went to the island. I never went to his homes. I never went to his offices. She denied completely. She said instead, if the committee was not being hypocritical, the person to put under oath and asked to testify is President Trump and his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. Now, the chairman of the committee yesterday said, well, Howard Lutnick can be invited, can be subpoenaed, but that President Trump, that will not happen because the president has denied. Now, the high point of the incident was that the Clintons had asked for an open session, but the committee said, the oversight committee said, oh, it will be a closed session. And yet, while the deposition was going on, there was a post on X showing Mrs. Clinton's picture. We did know that she looked disturbed. Now, that was a breach of whatever had been agreed. And then she was very confident that they will not be able to establish anything against her husband. 100%, she insists that her husband is innocent. And he will be appearing today, the reports say. Now, quickly, as for Iran and U.S., this is what we're dealing with here is a conflict between diplomacy and military conflict. The threat of military conflict is persistent because Gerald Ford, USS Gerald Ford, is on its way to the Middle East.
Yes.
USS Abraham Lincoln. These are two of the biggest aircraft carriers known to the world. And yet, Trump is threatening and is demanding a deal that will involve no uranium enrichment. Now, Iran has denied, has refused. He says that such a thing should not even be talked about. Now, the meeting in Geneva this week, that was the third one. The fourth one is going to take place on Monday, but that will be technical review by the parties involved in the presence of the International Atomic Agency, Energy Agency, IAEA. So that's what is going to happen. But the threat of war is still there. And that is why the Democrats are saying there must be approval by Congress and that Trump should not go and attack Iran unilaterally. As for Uganda, I said yesterday that Uganda has the harshest penalty for homosexuality within the purview of the Anti-Homosexuality Act of 2023. And you already defined what that law says. But the human rights groups are kicking. They're saying, no, this is not fair. But one small point about what happened to the two ladies is that it was, in fact, people in the neighborhood that went and reported to the police that the house where they live, there's always a congregation of women there. And, police should investigate. Talking about collective responsibility in maintaining the law. Thank you very much, Adefemi.